This is Ask a Couples Counsellor, a show that answers all the relationship questions you're too afraid to ask. On the show, we'll take your questions and give you the tools you need to build trust and intimacy with your partner. I'm your host, Neha Kapoor. I'm a registered clinical counsellor and psychotherapist, and I'm really passionate about helping couples navigate the challenges that we all go through. Because after all, every relationship encounters some stormy weather now and then. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Ask a Couples Counsellor, where we're tackling some really relatable relationship dilemmas. Ever found yourself stuck between your partner and friends who just don't click? Or maybe dealing with a mother-in-law who doesn't quite see eye to eye with you? Or a family member that won't stop asking when you're going to settle down? We'll be exploring ways to handle these tricky dynamics with a mix of open communication, boundary setting, and a healthy dose of empathy. So, if you've ever felt caught in the middle, pressured by family, or are just looking for a little support navigating these complex situations, this episode is for you. All right, let's get into it. Our first question for today comes from Kayla in Brisbane. Let's have a listen to Kayla's question.
What do you do if your partner and your friends don't get along?
Thank you so much for this question, Kayla. I'm sure many of our listeners can relate to this struggle. When your partner and friends don't get along, it can definitely feel like you're caught in the middle. So it's natural to want the people you care about to enjoy each other's company. But sometimes personalities clash, and that's okay. So a good starting point is to try to understand where everyone is coming from. So have open conversations, both with your partner and your friends, to get a sense of any underlying concerns or specific interactions that may have set things off. Sometimes it's just a matter of miscommunication or differing personalities rather than anything personal. It's also helpful to reassure both sides that they matter to you. So let them know that you value their presence in your life and that while you understand their feelings, you'd love for everyone to coexist peacefully. So you don't need to force friendships, but a mutual respect for your choices can go a long way. So finding a middle ground might mean spending time with your friends separately from your partner now and then, or hosting occasional casual gatherings with everyone without the pressure of becoming close. And remember that you don't have to push for a friendship that might not naturally be there. So you might also protect your peace by setting boundaries if anyone is being overly critical or negative, whether that's a friend towards your partner or vice versa. So, in the end, a little understanding and willingness to adapt can help everyone feel more comfortable and supportive, even if they're not each other's biggest fans. I hope that answers your question, Kayla. All right, let's get into our second question for today, which comes from an anonymous listener. Let's have a listen to their question.
My mother-in-law hates me. I know it, my husband knows it, and she knows it. Mostly we just try to avoid each other, but every time my husband and I have an argument, he goes running to his mum to back him up and refuses to hear what I'm saying. Given the nature of our relationship, how do I ask my mother-in-law to stay out of our relationship? And how do I get my husband to act like an adult instead of a child?
From what I've seen in similar situations, this kind of dynamic with in-laws can be very challenging, especially when your husband turns to his mother during conflicts. So you're absolutely right to want to set some boundaries around your relationship, and it's understandable that you're feeling frustrated and even maybe a bit undermined when your mother-in-law becomes involved in your disagreements. I would say that one of the most effective ways forward here often starts with an open and honest conversation between you and your husband. So rather than focusing on his behavior with his mother, you can try to express how it makes you feel when he brings her into your relationship issues. So let him know that you value his support and want to be able to work things out together, just the two of you. This can sometimes help him see that going to his mum for support is hurting your bond rather than strengthening it. So encourage him to consider what might make your communication feel safer and more supportive for him without involving others. And it might take a few conversations and reminders, but if he can recognize that keeping your relationship private helps build trust, he may become more willing to avoid running to his mother for backup. And when it comes to your mother in law, it can help to set boundaries that prioritize respect. So you don't necessarily have to confront her directly, which could stir up more tension. Instead, I would say if you and your husband can agree that your relationship disagreements stay between you, he can act as a buffer by gently steering his mother away from discussions about your private matters. So if he's resistant, you might ask him to imagine how it would feel if you were turning to someone outside the relationship to air your issues. And it may help him understand your perspective. Overall, it's about creating a united front with your husband so he knows he doesn't need outside validation and he can feel secure handling these issues with you as a team. So, setting these boundaries takes time and it might feel like small steps forward, but they're worth it to establish a healthier balance in your marriage. I hope that answers your question. Let's get into our last question for today, which comes from Dean in Ultimo. Let's have a listen to Dean's question.
How do I stop my family from bugging me about being happily single?
Look, Dean, I hear you. I know it can be incredibly frustrating when family members just can't seem to accept that being single is something that you're genuinely happy with. So, from what I've seen, family pressure around relationships is incredibly common. And often, well meaning relatives simply don't realize how dismissive it can feel. So sometimes they're stuck in the mindset that being in a relationship is the only path to fulfillment. And they don't see how much joy and satisfaction you already have in your life. I had a client once who was in a similar position. She'd built a fulfilling life for herself, but every time she saw her family, they'd bring up the question of when she was going to settle down. It was almost as if her happiness wasn't complete until she had a partner. So, in our work together, what ended up helping her was gently but firmly setting boundaries by using humor and empathy. So, when her mum would say, "I just want to see you happy," she'd respond with something like, "I appreciate that, but I'm actually really happy right now. Can you celebrate this with me?" It helped redirect the conversation in a positive way and reminded her family that she was content just as she was. So, another approach that can work is to set clear, respectful boundaries with family members. So, you could say something like, "I know you're coming from a place of love, but I feel great with where I'm at in life. I promise I'll keep you posted if that ever changes. But for now, I'd love if we could focus on other things." Sometimes family just needs a little nudge to understand that this is what makes you truly happy. Because ultimately, reinforcing your confidence and joy in being single can, over time, help them accept it too. And it's a process, and you might have to remind them occasionally. But the more you express how content you are, the easier it becomes for them to respect your choices. I hope that answers your question, Dean. And before I go, if you have any burning questions you want answered, send them to novoempowercounselling@gmail.com. Let's navigate this journey together because better relationships start with understanding. I can't wait to hear from you. You've been listening to Ask a Couples Counselor, a show that answers all the relationship questions you're too afraid to ask. This show is produced by Novo Empower Counselling. We provide a range of services, including couples counselling, individual counselling, and online counselling. To find out more, visit our website novoempowercounselling.com.au. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. To make sure you don't miss an episode of Ask a Couples Counsellor, be sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, I'd love it if you could leave me a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm your host, Neha Kapoor, and I'll see you in the next episode.